What's the latest with the Libertarian Party and the Free State movement in New Hampshire? Let's talk to Zephan Wood. He is a recent Free Stater, a current law student at UNH Franklin Pierce, and he does a lot of work over at the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. Let's catch up with him now. This is the New England Take. I'm your host, AJ Kierstead. TheNewEnglandTake.com. Check out more from the show. Like and subscribe right now. Right now. Let's start to the interview. You're actually my first officially publicly announced Free Stater. I'm sure I've had other Free Staters on as a right-wing guy who leans libertarian on many issues. I'm sure there's others that don't openly say that they came because of the movement, because it's politically it's been a bit of a mixed bag for many the last couple cycles, especially since COVID, with the Democrats pushing hard against it. But it feels like the movement is beginning to rise back up again, and people are a little more willing to say, hey, I came here because of this movement. So just elevator pitch. What is the Free State movement, and why did you take part in it?
So basically, the Free State Project is the idea of getting libertarians from all over the country and ideally all over the world to converge on one specific place where we can finally have a free market, a free society, and basically to allow the principles of liberty and freedom to actually take root in one spot. Right now, the liberty movement's kind of fragmented. We're kind of all over the place, and in most places, it's either very, very hard-leaning red or right-wing, and then very, very hard-leaning left or blue. So it's about time that people that love liberty and freedom have at least one place where they can go. In terms of what got me involved, you mentioned COVID. That was really a big turning point for me. I was living in California, and it was horrible there. They were masking. They were my school was shut down. You know, basically my whole life was changed. And I got out right in time because I graduated from a four-year I was going to at the time. And right as I was graduating, they were putting vaccine mandates in place, and they said that the only way that you could go to school would be if you got the shot. Meanwhile, I had found out about the Free State Project, and I was sick of California's BS. I'm very pro gun too, and that was like a big thing for me. But at the same time, New Hampshire was making it illegal for institutions that received public funding to mandate vaccines. So as California and New York and all these other states get way worse, New Hampshire keeps getting better. And I think that that's in large part due to the live free or die culture here, of course, but it's also due to the Free State Project and the fact that we have a lot of movers and shakers that moved here for that purpose.
In New Hampshire, inherently, in my experience, so I've been here since I started my undergrad back in 2006 at Franklin Pierce University. Did my undergrad over there all 4 years. And I got hired over at the law school, which we'll dive into, which you're currently a student over at UNH Franklin Pierce. Full disclosure, I worked there for 12 years before leaving there 3 months ago for just another job because I got lucky with another opportunity. But I feel like culturally, New Hampshire is very different when it comes to individual liberty, keep the government on fighting amongst itself out of the way. It's partially, I think, what's bred our state house to be kind of an interesting hive of some weirdos, to put it frankly, and we don't pay them. I mean, they make $100 a year, so it's people that are really, really interested in what they want to bring to the table, as opposed to it being a job that they sit in forever. And these two things mixed together is just fascinating to watch as just a political observer and newscaster.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what you said about the weirdos, I don't think it's even all exclusively on one side or the other. Like for example, this is something that really surprised me. The Democrats in this state they at least posture to be anti-tax. Like they're like, oh, the property taxes are too high and blah blah blah. And they're also very pro-police, the Democrats. And very pro war on drugs, which is something that, as a Californian prior and just, paying attention to national politics in general, that's not really the case. But here in New Hampshire, they kind of have to hobble together this broad, weird coalition, and that's kind of what we see. And that's just one example. There's a bunch of really weird coalitions in the state house that
Yeah, I
that
mean, the
are interesting to look
Republicans
at.
as a whole have this huge divide. I mean,
Totally.
between these damn free staters, as many people
Yeah,
call
right.
them, and the more conservative, business-focused Republicans like your Sununos. I mean,
Right.
that dynamic on its own is just fascinating from a political standpoint. And then you see the legislation that manages to come through, like the education freedom accounts and everything, which has been a huge
Right.
milestone when it comes to both sides of the Republicans coming together.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you also have the Trumpers. You have some Republicans that are like very staunchly pro-life, and that's their one issue. The thing that sort of disheartens me is that even though the Democrats, are weird in the state, they're still very monolithy in this state. Like I don't really see them break ranks that often, which is really unfortunate because there are instances where free staters and other liberty Republicans introduce like bills that are generally like left leaning in the normal context. But because it's introduced by a free stater or a pro liberty Republican, they tend to not emphasize it as much. For example, there's a bill this session that was introduced by Representative Matt Santonastasu, who I'd recommend everyone check him out. He's a great pro liberty, open free stater rep. And the bill he introduced was to ban no knock raids. And I reached out to some organizers about BLM, with BLM to see if they would support it. And it just didn't seem like there was a lot of enthusiasm, even though they hit the streets and they're like, we need police reform now, we need all these things. And then somebody introduces it and, it doesn't bring out the thousands of people into the streets that the protests do. The testimony holes tend to be pretty bare when you actually need to go to put your effort in to change policy. So it's a very strange dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, this is my analysis of the Democrats. I've said the similar things before about them, but I feel like they've gotten kind of stuck in I mean, the same thing that the MAGA Republicans are called out for, where they get focused on the national topics. They stick with the narrative no matter what, and I find it to be extremely counterproductive. And instead of finding like the education freedom counts, I think are the prime example of that, where on one hand, many of them, like Altschiller, are sent their kids to private schools, but in turn say,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, you need to send your kids to a public school for a year before you send them to another one," which is just cruel.
Yeah. Yeah, that bill in particular really grinded my gears. This session I reviewed like around 320-ish bills so far, and that one was one of my least favorites. I almost would next session want to see free staters or liberty Republicans introduce a bill that says that if parents want to enroll their kids in public school, that they have to have one session where they homeschool them or put them in a private school, so that the kids can and the parents can experience the difference between the two, because right now it's just kind of a monopoly. And what the education freedom accounts do is they make it so that there's actually competition in education, which decreases and this is the case with any competition, but it decreases the price and increases the quality. And if it's done even more, if it's emphasized even more, then it's just going to get cheaper and it's going to get better. Really, the Democrats should be in favor of education freedom accounts because it improves the quality of public education. But if you tell them that, they'd be like, "What? How's that possible?" But it's really self-evident if you just understand basic tenets of economics.
So to prove I'm not kissing anyone's ass here, I'm going to go into the downside or the problems that we've found.
Oh, please
I've found with
do.
libertarians too. Here is I'm
Do.
independently affiliated. I vote Republican across and Libertarian for everything. But generally speaking, I found there's been a huge problem with the libertarian movement. Which is very much a meme at this point. There is no true libertarian. It's this constant battle, and there's this issue where I found this especially with certain individuals, I will not say it's across the board of the Free Staters, is this kind of going into the world of anarcho-capitalism as being the focus, where we remove government entirely. That is kind of the line where I say, like, no, that's not how I feel whatsoever, and I have a problem with that. I mean, how do you, as someone that's trying to work within the legal system and bills and such going through, strike that balance with when you know there's these strong voices in the party that are pushing for these sorts of things?
Well, I mean, I've seen constitutionalists, minarchists, anarchists, ANCAPs all work together on things like this, like it really, where it tends to be a problem is like online or just through that kind of discourse where it's like, oh, you're a radical, or oh, you don't go far enough, or whatever. But in terms of actually supporting policy and things like that, we all tend to be on the same page, because what we all agree on is that the government's too big, right? And if you start with that premise, you can really have a very, very broad coalition of even progressives that are like, yeah, we have crony capitalism, and we have this worrying blend of markets and government, which a lot of libertarians and minarchists even agree with. And if you have that be the focus, that can really facilitate some good change and some good policy. I think that the biggest divide within the community, like within the actual like libertarian free stater community, are between the people that like vote and the people that are like so anarchist that they're like, no, even participating in the system in that way is violent. And so that's actually where the real divide is, like just amongst this community. But in terms of like actually getting policy together, I see people of all different shapes and political ideologies working together and getting stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is part of the problem when the whole concept of the movement in the Libertarian Party is independent thought and independent freedom when it comes to just your daily life and everything like that, which in turn can create this inherent problem with organizational efforts. The free state movement is obviously an example of them coming together with people with all sorts of different thinking. But on the other hand, it also makes it hard for it to become more of a corporate party. Is kind of a negative way of phrasing it, but I think you know what I mean, where you actually come together as a group. And this one thing you can say on a positive organizational way of looking at the Democratic Party is they are all working together. They all have one thing they're pushing for. As much as we may despise or love certain aspects of what they're pushing for, at least you're able to come together and say this is what's going on. And when you have such strong I feel like there's a lot of very, very strong personalities in the Libertarian Party and the Free Staters, like Jeremy Kauffman, for example, that can be very polarizing, and it's very hard to get I mean, even Jeremy Kauffman or a lot of these other people, you still see him, going and working with the Liberty Republicans and things like that. And he's a huge supporter of like the NHLA and all these other things. So, even though like a lot of us are loud or vocal or, polarizing, we all still come together. I think and you brought up the Libertarian Party. I think that in New Hampshire, especially, the purpose of the Libertarian Party is not actually to win elections, which sounds weird, because it's like, well, that's all parties. And that's my problem, right? I find it to be counterproductive and terrible, but that's my opinion.
But I mean, and there is some truth to that for sure. But I think that there's a real big utility in having there be the principled people in the room that are always willing to shift the Overton window. Not saying that the NHGOP pro-liberty reps aren't principled. It's just that sometimes they're put in political situations where if they vote in favor of something that's like the most principled thing to do, they can be in trouble. Like, for example, gun stock, right? And that's the role of the Libertarian Party, I think, in the state, is to shift culture, to shift attitudes, and to make it so that it's like, oh, yeah, you guys are great, but you're not going far enough, and these are all the ways that you're not going far enough. So like maybe we'll get to the point to where the Libertarian Party stands a real chance. I mean, I think that with the Democrats no longer having the first in the nation primary here, and we can, debate on whether or not that's going to happen. But if it does, what'll happen is you'll see a huge leaving of Democratic money from the state. And it'll kind of leave a hole open for, I think, the Libertarian Party to get into, where you'll basically the new Overton window in the state will be between like minarchists and potentially like anarchists, like between the GOP and the NH Libertarian Party. Where essentially, like, now it's like, okay, well, we just need the government to be like only there for essential functions, so like providing for the basics, right? And like it's going to be that push and pull, but I guess we'll see what happens with the whole first in the nation primary changing.
Yeah.
But I'm very hopeful that.
Yeah, I mean, plus if you remove the money from the situation as much from the Democrats, I mean, there's a chance of, hey, they'll no longer have that fundraising motivation to stay along the party line no matter what. And Buckley there over at the New Hampshire Democratic Party may not be able to have that iron fist he has over his reps and such, because it's strong. I mean, there's no way around it. Yeah. I mean, they're basically the counterbalance or the polar opposite of what's going on with the Libertarian Party. So I'm not trying to pick on them necessarily as much as I pick on them on Twitter all the time.
Right.
Poor Colin Booth. It kind of shows the other way it can go, where it goes this other extreme corporatization of a party in such a way with all the money. I mean,
right. No, I mean, I was pretty surprised to see how corrupt the Democrats are in this state, because where in California, a big thing that they talk about is like, the whole money in politics thing, it corrupts and blah, blah, blah. But out here, it's like, nope, we're establishment, we're institutional. We take all of the money, we take all of the bribes. I mean, look at Maggie Hassan. She was like the most like funded federal Senate race in the country, I think. And you look at Chair Buckley's Twitter bio, and he's like have been here since like the 1600s or whatever. So he's just like very entrenched in like that sort of like establishment, oh, I've been here, so I matter more sort of mentality, which has been highlighted in his rhetoric towards free staters. I mean, he's been very genocidal in his language. I don't want to overstate my case here, but I mean, he said things like, oh, they're vermin and they're parasites that free staters are, that have to be kicked out of the state, and they're invasive. And then people piggyback off that because he's the head honcho, he's the leader of the party, and they cling on to that, and they take it even further. There are people on Twitter that say, "Oh, we have to exterminate them, we have to do this and do that," and it's pretty clear that that rot and that just that mentality can lead to some really gross rhetoric and behavior. As much crap as free staters get, I think that the leadership in the Democratic Party doesn't get nearly enough for what they say in their rhetoric.
The New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, which you've been doing some work with, they're a nonpartisan coalition working to increase individual freedom in New Hampshire. Stolen from their Twitter bio, because there's a great little one-liner on it. What does this organization do?
So basically what the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance does is it goes through all of the bills that are submitted by the House and Senate, and it reviews them based on how pro or anti-liberty they are. It basically volunteers. It's a completely volunteer-run organization. Nobody gets paid. We all look through the bills, and then we rate them based on certain categories. Like, for example, if it increases personal liberty, then we mark that. If it decreases, we do that. If it bolsters property rights, we mark that. Doesn't, mark that. Increases, decreases taxes, things like that. And then it's given a raw score. And depending on the score and the level of importance in general, it's put on the gold standard, which is handed out to all state reps and state senators before they vote, basically telling them which way is the pro or anti-liberty way to vote. And then at the end of the the state reps are given a grade basically based off of their voting record and how they voted on the gold standard issues. And it goes from A all the way down to F, and then the lowest is constitutional threat. So the people that are basically like, oh, what did the NHLA mark on this? I'm going to do the opposite, like that. Those are the constitutional threats. And then based off of that, a lot of people that are in the liberty community and other organizations decide who they plan on door knocking for and supporting and things like that. So it's a really great organization. I think it's probably one of the most effective pro-liberty organizations in the state. I mean, the Free State Project is cool, obviously, because it helps get people here. But I think that besides the Free State Project, like the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance actually does the most for liberty in the state, if arguably not even more.
Yeah, I mean, if you're working on actual bills that will be put into law or not put into law, I mean, it's super important. It's more important than getting warm bodies in the state. And let's talk about let's talk about some of the issues that are being discussed this session. I mean, or actually in previous sessions also. Let's start off with cannabis. It looks like slowly but surely Sununu is being pounded about the head over and over again. Legalize marijuana. You got the Democrats for the most part. You got the liberty-focused Republicans. You got the Libertarian Party members in there all voting for it. Where are we sitting with this now?
So, I mean, the main obstacle for cannabis legalization in the past has been the Senate. A lot of good bills go past the House, no problem. Basically, if it's a pro-liberty bill, it gets past the House, and then it reaches the Senate, and it's dead on arrival. But what makes me more optimistic this session is that we have two very staunchly pro-liberty people in the Senate, which might not sound like a lot, but it's actually more than there's ever been. Like all of the people before that were pro-liberty were kind of lackluster. But this time we have two really solid, really principled senators in there that will shift the Overton window to be a lot more pro-cannabis. And you have to take into account of the fact that most of the constituents of the senators have had enough of this. I mean, I think that it's upwards of 80% of Granite Staters support legalizing cannabis. All of my neighbors, are like, what the heck is this? Why haven't we had legal cannabis yet? Just like you. And another obstacle is that the Senate has said, oh, well, I mean, it doesn't really matter what we do anyway, even if we pass it. Sununu's going to be against it, so why even sacrifice that political capital, right? But recently, Sununu's been saying it's inevitable. He's saying things like, oh, cannabis legalization is inevitable. We have to do it right. Last session, there was a bill that was going to have to be regulated by the Liquor Commission, which I thought was a horrible bill. And I think I reviewed that one and said, like, yeah, as much as I support cannabis legalization, you don't want it managed by that mess. And it was something that Sununu was actually really in favor of. And then this session, before he said it was inevitable, there was a bill that was introduced that was bipartisan. It had the House Majority Speaker, Jason Osborne, and the House Minority Leader, I forget his name, but obviously he's a Democrat. And they both co-signed this together, and it's a very good compromise bill. Like, I'm not a huge favor of compromises. I'm, principle first. Let's get right. Yeah. Exactly. I'm an activist. Like, let's get this done. Yeah. But that being said, it's actually a really good compromise bill. Like, so it doesn't introduce new taxes. It basically just applies the meals and rooms tax to cannabis. And the funding just goes to fund, treatment programs and education programs about drugs, which, like, if you're going to put the money anywhere, why not put it there, right? And there's a lot of other good things about it, like it allows for unlimited, like, personal grow, I think, which is, like, awesome. And a bunch of other really good stuff. It would make New Hampshire the lowest taxed and lowest regulated state in the country in respect to cannabis once we do that. So no more complaints of like, oh, how does the live free or die state not have legal cannabis? It's like, not only do we have legal cannabis, it's better legal cannabis than the rest of the country.
Yeah, exactly. That's the big thing. So if we can make that happen, we can do it right and be a leader for future states and possibly the feds with finally getting the damn descheduling happening and such, I mean, that'd be fantastic. So we only got like 4 minutes left on the interview, so I want to be sure to have you touch upon, like, you're a 1L law student, which is a first-year law student over at UNH Franklin Pierce School of Law. I gotta say, I've always said this, real world experience is the most important thing when you're going through the education process, getting out there into the field. How do you feel like your work with the Liberty Alliance and just in general being an activist working in the libertarian community has helped you in your journey to get a JD?
Well, I think it has and is going to help me a lot moving forward. I'm thinking that my focus in law is going to be immigration law, because online you just see so many people that know that New Hampshire is the place to be if they want freedom, but the main obstacle that they encounter is the immigration system. And I think that everyone can agree that America, the purpose of it is to be a place where those that seek more freedom and liberty and opportunity and prosperity can go. And I think that people that maybe I'm a little biased here, but I think that libertarians and other types of people that are liberty oriented tend to embody those principles the best. So I really want to focus on basically helping potential free staters from other countries get here and establish their lives without having to deal with the intricacies of the immigration system. So getting plugged into the community has really helped me with that, obviously, because now it's basically going to be my whole client base moving forward. So yeah, that's basically the gist of it.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about really wanting to make change. The best way to make change is actually understand how the damn system works, and I think that's something a lot of activists forget.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, so many activists focus on just dismantling it and all of that. And I think because I also have a bit of a conservative bent, there's the principle of what's the difference between a progressive and a conservative. A progressive tears down a fence, just because it's a fence and it's an obstacle that's getting in the way of what they deem to be progress. Meanwhile, a conservative is okay, well, let me analyze this fence. Let me see if there's a purpose of it. Maybe it's meant to keep out bears, before I tear it down, right? And then after making sure that there's no reason the fence is up, then perhaps they tear down the fence, or maybe they put up an even stronger fence, right? I mean, maybe it serves a legitimate function. So understanding how the system works, I think, is imperative to actually addressing the problems and issues, for sure.
Zephan Wood, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a fun conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
So Porcupine Law on Twitter, if you want to give them a follow. If you want to learn more about the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, go to nhliberty.org. I highly suggest you check it out. They're doing some interesting work over there. And wish Zephan the best of luck as he works on his JD over at UNH Franklin Pierce. And hopefully we'll have him back on in the future, as well as other free staters, to learn more about the movement. You've been listening to The New England Take. I'm your host, AJ Kierstead. Be sure to check out thenewenglandtake.com.